Let's go over what a VPAT is. VPAT stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. So this is a templated document that really standardizes how we account for accessibility. So on the screen with me is the WCAG edition of the VPAT. And there are a few different editions, but just know that they are based on different technical standards for accessibility. In this case, the standard that we're using is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So here we have the WCAG edition. And so as I'm scrolling down the VPAT, what you will see is there are several pages of information and instructions. This is really background information that helps us fill in the VPAT so that we can eventually have an accessibility conformance report or ACR. So just remember that the VPAT is just a free document that we can download right now. I think some source of confusion is that the terms VPAT and ACR are used interchangeably in the marketplace. And actually, the term VPAT is persuasive. But when people ask for a VPAT, what they're really asking for is an ACR or an accessibility conformance report. So just remember that the report is the completed VPAT. The VPAT itself is just an empty document that we need to fill in. So I'm scrolling down the VPAT now, and we're going to go through 10 pages of information and instructions. And then we get to the actual accessibility conformance report section of the VPAT. And there are really two parts here that we need to fill in. There are the details, and then there is the accessibility table where we account for the accessibility of a product or service. And so on the screen now, we have the details, most of the details for the ACR. We're going to fill those in. And then as I scroll down, we get to the table, and this is where we have three columns. The first column is the criteria of the technical standards. So these are really the requirements to meet the technical standards. And then the second column is the conformance level. This is where we add in whether or not we meet these criteria for the technical standards. And then we have the remarks and explanations. And so not all the time do you need to fill in the remarks and explanations, but if there are instances where your product or service partially supports or does not support the given criterion, then we need to have information in the remarks and explanations column that speaks to that lack of conformance or the partial conformance. But this is all the VPAT document is. And as I stated, once we fill this in, then we get the accessibility conformance report. And this is what buyers and procurement agents are actually after. It's not the empty templated document, but this is what they are referencing the filled in document when they ask for a VPAT. Now I'm going to tab over, and then we're going to go to the ITIC website. And so ITIC stands for Information Technology Industry Council, and they are the developers and the group who maintains the VPAT documents. And so on this screen with me, we have downloads for all of these different VPATs. And you can see here, there's the WCAG edition, there's the International edition, there is the EN 301-549 Standard edition, there is the Section 508 edition, and then we have some other links that are going to change tracking and other documents and information. But the key is the different versions, the different editions of the VPAT documentation. We can go and download a VPAT right now, and then we just fill that in to create the ACR and complete the ACR. Now, one note here while we're on this topic is you really need to have an audit to accurately complete the accessibility table, the accessibility portion of the VPAT. And because the whole reason for this documentation is so that we have a way to assess a product or service's accessibility status quickly. And so buyers and procurement agents are going to ask for an ACR so that they can evaluate your product or service's accessibility. And so this gets into who fills in your VPAT. Do you have someone on your team who has accessibility knowledge, experience, and expertise? Were they the ones who evaluated your product or service? Also, what is happening increasingly in the marketplace is that in-house issued ACRs are not looked upon as nearly as favorably as independently issued ACRs. So keep that in mind, because obviously, if you're working on your own ACR, there's the tendency for bias. There is also, most organizations also lack the expertise necessary to evaluate a product or service for accessibility. So this is why the with ACRs, more and more are being sourced out to independent digital accessibility companies, because they have the knowledge and expertise. And then also it's much more favorable to have an ACR that's issued independently from this third party company. But you can fill this in yourself. You can create your own ACR, and then you will have the documentation. And it's always best if you work on the ACR after you've taken measures to improve the accessibility. Otherwise, all of the accessibility issues are going to be reflected in the resulting document, the ACR. And ideally, right, when you are working to get contracts or to get your product purchased, you want to have a strong accessibility, so that is more likely that your product is chosen or that your company is chosen to get the contract. So, this is what a VPAT is, and it's really getting into, now we're getting into the reason why the VPAT exists, so that procurement agents and buyers can easily compare the accessibility of, well, not only compare the accessibility between different products and services, but also just have an accurate accounting of the accessibility of individual products and services, and then also so that they can easily compare the two. Note that this is not an audit, it's not a certification. Even though we have this table is not an audit. A nice analogy here is that when you think of a basketball game, there's a box score. Uh, for this right here, we're just looking at the end result, so we could just look at the points. And so we're only looking at the points and the final score with this ACR. We're not looking at any other details, but where there is some additional context to be had, then that's where we can look to the remarks and explanations. And here there can be additional context, depending on the support level, or the conformance level and the level of support for these various criteria in the technical standards. So I've gone beyond just what is a VPAT, but this really is a nice explanation of this document that I have on the screen with me. The VPAT is just a template. It's a template that you can download right now, and I will include a link to the ITIC website in the description for this video. You can go download that template, but just remember that to populate the template and complete the template, yes, the details are important, but the material portion, the accessibility portion of the VPAT is going to require an evaluation, and you want to have a thorough evaluation so that the VPAT, the ACR accurately reflects the accessibility status of your product or service. So it really is an accounting of the accessibility of your product or service. And that's why the evaluation aspect of this is so important. And in some cases, buyers or procurement agents might not look beyond the fact that you do indeed have this ACR, and it appears to reflect that your product or service is in good standing in terms of accessibility. But what is more often than not, especially when I'm talking to clients, buyers and procurement agents they're scrutinizing the ACR, and they're making sure that it is indeed accurate. So that's why it's always helpful to work with an accessibility expert. And then it really does, there are some buyers who will only accept ACRs if they are independently issued. So that's also a good reason to work with a digital accessibility company when it comes to filling in a VPAT and creating an ACR. So that is it for what is a VPAT. I will include more information if you need help. Accessible.org helps with VPAT services, so we can fill in the VPAT and create the ACR and also provide the audit, of course. All of these services are available at accessible.org, and I will include contact information if you'd like to reach out to me directly and ask about VPATs and ACRs. I will be available to help. So I will include all of that information in the description.